Waltz.
Thank you. Just to build on that one more, I'm also, for one more minute, I'm also from Florida. So essentially what you're saying is you've described the policy today. Lieutenant General Burt violated that policy, or at least what she described as her efforts as a senior commander to reassign people based on a series of criteria. That's not in accordance with your policy, with the policy as you described it for the Space Force, correct?
Sir, I described our policies as you've heard.
Her statements, as you heard today, in accordance with your policy?
Well, she said she's compelled to consider. She did not say that.
Even if they're less qualified. It was her statement.
We have multiple guardians who are qualified for our position, sir.
So, and you mentioned preferences. Just to build on Representative Gates here, if perhaps their family feels unsafe because of a gun control policy and they don't feel like they can appropriately buy firearms to protect them, would you consider that?
Sir, there's an exception to the process, but the guardian would have to prove that there's some sort of an undue hardship on them. Right. I would highly doubt that would meet the,
I would hope, because I think what we're trying to demonstrate here is we've opened statements from the senior leaders like that opens a Pandora's box of political issues put on the table, enacted by state elected officials that in our view should not be considered. I'm reassured to hear you say they should not be considered. But when you have 3-star generals saying not only should they be, she is doing it, do you see how that introduces doubt into our constituents and the American people that the senior leaders of the Space Force or the rest of the services are following the law?
Sir, I certainly see how that could be construed, yes.
Is she still in her position?
She is.
So there was no consequences for that statement, which is not in accordance with the policy that you've outlined.
Again, she did not make a statement publicly that she's actually reassigned anyone.
No, but she made a statement that she's considering it, and specifically state law in Florida. Specified a state, specified a law that she is considering in furtherance of her command, and she's still in command.
I did not hear a specific state law specified.
Well, as it pertained, it was at a Pride event as it pertains to LGBTQ. That was specific.
She was speaking at a DOD event, sir.
Okay. I think the broader issue is we're hearing your testimony today, but when we have events like that, when we have a non-quota quota memo, goals, from the Secretary of the Air Force, when we have an orientation at the Air Force Academy, a slide that with a woman holding a picture saying, if you don't see my race, you don't see me, when it instructs cadets to not use the term colorblind, yet you're testifying that race isn't a factor, when the superintendent of the Air Force Academy tells me in a meeting that he finds the term colorblind offensive, then we have either some massive disconnects, or what my suspicion is you have an informal set of policies that may not be specifically in writing. You may not call it a quota, you may call it a goal, where these factors are being considered. General Stitt, you just testified that guidance is given in furtherance or during the promotion board of how to incorporate diversity. That may not be a directive per se, but guidance is often taken as such. So let me just ask you this in the time I have remaining. Does anyone on the board today have any data that you can provide the committee that shows that a more diverse or less diverse, let's take a submarine in the Navy, a crew, is more effective, is more ready?
Congressman, thanks for the question. We do not have any specific data right now that talks about any diversity, equity, inclusion efforts and how it relates to combat effectiveness.
Okay.
We do have an ongoing study at the Naval Postgraduate School that's reviewing inclusion and how it relates to the topics we're discussing, and we expect that study in the January 24 timeframe.
General Miller, we have the non-quota quota memo. Do you have any data that a squadron, a bomber crew any unit in the Air Force is more or less ready based on the percentages of their racial diversity?
No, sir, not on the percentages, no, sir.
Does anyone have any data showing, I mean, I understand the narrative that, diversity of thought leads to a better unit, but do you have any data that shows that?
Gentleman's time has expired.
I didn't think so,
Or you-
because it doesn't exist. Thank you,
Submit
Mr.
the-
Chairman.